We're going to work on some heavy Trident Maple pruning today, some structural pruning. These are field grown mostly. Taking them from something like this to something a bit more manageable and tame, right? With branches and movement in all the right places. Right? So let me set this back down real quick. Come back over here. So now this mid to late winter season is the time to come in, as long as you can protect them from any severe freezes, to come in and do these major structural cuts. And what's happened with these is they've kind of grown out of themselves and their utility as really fine bonsai. They just need a little work. You've got really thick branches up top. You've got odd movement, right? These big horseshoe bends and growths. One thing in particular about tridents is their branches always emerge directly opposite one another. So the buds always create these bars, right? Just growing straight opposite one another. So you really have to stay on top of them to make them look nice, but otherwise you get a bar branch like this, which is easy enough to select. Let's keep the big one for now. No big deal. But how do we want to shape this tree? And what we're really looking for is bringing it back and taming it back down to have it appeal again as an interesting tree. And these are the kind of cuts of like a 5-year plan kind of thing. I'm not going to make cuts tonight and it's going to turn into something like, ooh, look at that. It's going to be like, whoa, what's going on? And then you'll see the tree of the future, but you won't be able to. It's not going to be an easy transformation. We'll put it that way. Got a grafting knife just to clean up the edges on these big cuts. That one could be done with cut paste, but I've got the putty. So I'm just pruning out the edge. These grafting knives are insanely sharp, so just a gentle nudge is all you need. And I'm sure, since I'm doing it on camera, I will lose a finger or something dramatic. Or if my wife's watching from the other room, she'll come in. What are you doing? Cutting the knife towards you. It's okay. Semi-pro, right? So just cleaning the edge of the cut, and I'll show you up close in just a minute. And one thing, I don't know if it really matters, I always put my knife away. I don't want to turn around and reach for it. So we're looking right here. It's not a flush cut. It's just, I took off that flat edge and just rounded it a bit, because when the wound starts to curl over, it's not going to form as big of a bulge. It's going to grow up and follow that, and it's going to round off. You can see a few of those cuts here where it starts to do that. And I could come in and re-wound these areas to encourage that healing, but they still are growing rather vigorously. So it's okay. We don't have to do that yet. And this putty essentially, wound sealant, sticks to whatever's driest. So always wet your fingers, put it on there, and it is water resistant, so it'll keep infection out. It doesn't really do much as far as the healing process, but it does keep your trees from getting disease from the weather and the elements. You can always clean the moss off the trunks to see where that root flare is. These are pretty nice little trees. Let's see what we've got. The station's a mess. When repotting season happens, it kind of just starts to get crazy. But there we go. We can see it a little bit better. more thing. There we go, scissors. Pretty much loppers and a saw. That's about it. The nice thing is Trident maples will root fairly easily. So as you're doing this, feel free to have like a bucket of water and all these cuts you can just plop in there. And when you get a chance, you can go in with your rooting hormone and make a bunch of rooted cuttings. That one's downward growing. We'll get rid of that. Thinking about the new leader being up here. Maybe we take this whole thing off. There we go. Then we might even take that whole thing off. So I'll remove that putty real quick. Let's do it. I want you to see it beforehand. It's this big, obnoxious knob right here. There we go. And then just recessing the middle of that so that when I apply the putty and starts to heal, it heals flat instead of bulging out across the center of that. That's pretty good cuts along here. I don't think I'll need too much carving on that. So we'll just take that putty we used and form it into a ball. Make sure. So just make it into a little ball and then push it into the middle and spread it out. Cover that up, and that'll keep all that disease out of there. Especially here in Mississippi with all the rains that we get this time of year during dormant season. It's really important to keep that covered up. And cut paste. For any smaller cuts, I just use this liquid cut paste. It works great. Some of these are even starting to, the buds are elongating and swelling, so got to get this done pretty quick before they open up into leaf. As always, if you have any questions or anything, hop on the chat and let me know. They're fairly inflexible, so I'm going to opt for anything growing kind of straight up. Take that off. Use these buds as they grow. So if they don't have good branch placement, if they're thicker than this, then it's going to be really tough to wire. But luckily, you can directionally prune. So if I come back to here, it's going to send, there's two buds, one on either side. It's going to send them both directions and grow out. The buds back here, why I cut to here instead of back here, the buds here are on the top and the bottom, so it'd grow like this. And it'd look all wonky. So I came out here to these, they rotate directions. So there's two vertical and horizontal, vertical, horizontal. So I came out to the horizontal ones. So now it'll flatten out and become a nice little pad. There we go. Down here, there's a lot of swelling. that's just going to cause inverse taper. So I'm going to kind of go through and get rid of things that are too small and weak, things that are just too funky. Try and kind of have a rudimentary idea of where we want the front to be, which would not be what's facing you now, because you get major inverse taper. I mean, it doesn't look bad as far as the base goes. So maybe we go to this side, take that off there. This one, I'm going to keep the horizontal, the vertical ones that coming off the top and the bottom, because that branch bends downward. So now this vertical one is going to come straight out, and we'll be able to prune to shape on that one. We're going to cut these back. I'm going to take this big thick one all the way off, actually. It feels a little better up there. So the negative thing about, another negative thing about this being the front, right, this or the other side, is your apex totally just goes off kilter. If we want to develop a tree, let me see about getting this off here. There we go. It was previously pruned branch. It was dying back, but the tree was growing around it rather than growing with it. Is we get a pretty good base flare, but the tree's fairly narrow. So how do we, maybe we can incorporate that. It's fairly flexible. Maybe it's something like that. The problem is this portion of the tree and this portion of the tree are at a disjuncture, right? We'll just work through it as we do that's why cleaning the trees are so important. You just work through what has to come off versus what aesthetically may need to come off. Say, in order to make this tree healthy, to get rid of any major structural flaws, what exactly needs, what has to happen? And then we can go through and say, okay, now what do we want to happen with the tree? If we choose this direction that looks best with this, these need to open up just a little bit. And then you have this kind of the only portion of the tree down here with any branching coming straight at the viewer. So we need to rotate it a little bit, shorten that up, maybe shorten this up as well. Let's take it all the way back. No, let's take this one back. Take this back here. So just going through vertically growing, cleaning out, thinning out where there's 3 or more branches, back to just 2 so you don't get inverse taper. All the little things. And then by the time you're done cleaning, the tree may just appear. If it doesn't, then you can have your fun with it. Maybe something like this. Can we lean into this area? How do we deal with that? Do we come in and take it off? So this is, you can see right here, there's a line where this was another trunk that was pruned back. But all of the new growth came out way down here rather than up here, which is where it usually emerges from. And that would have been great, but that's not what happened. We can't come back down to here and use this because that would just be a huge cut. If this cut weren't here and we just had this trunk, that's probably what I would do, is come back to here and have this transition to the entire tree. We may see that on another one that we'll do, but we're going to run through a handful of these today. So get rid of this portion of it. I don't know what happened. I got home and then suddenly I'm all stuffed up. so I don't know if there's something allergic in the house or what. Pardon me. Uh, I feel like this side is better than this side over here. Maybe that comes down. Take that whole thing. But it's fused together, I think, unfortunately. That'd be it. That's a big scar to heal. That's my concern, is that cutting here, if this reveals the entire portion of that tree and it has actually fused together, and that's a big wound. Well, it can't grow over it, but does that make the tree completely useless? I'm going to take this off. This off. I think something like that might actually be the front and let these grow. Let this grow. But, I mean, that's not for us to decide. These are just kind of major prunes to get it set in the right direction at least. We may come back and do more major cuts next year. But it's cleaned out. It's got some direction in life as far as where it needs to go and what's going on with this tree in general. It's kind of a big branch. There we go. Making sure that we remove any structural flaws now rather than having to deal with them later. And then we'll patch up those holes and that'll be that. My normal turntable out here, it's much quieter. This one's rather noisy. It's under a giant hinoki cypress out in the greenhouse that I've been pruning on. Almost done with it. But that's kind of setting it up for future growth and development. I'll have to make major decisions, but definitely some decisions to let it kind of go in a direction without it being detrimental to its, without having it get more out of hand than it already was. There you have it. All right. Seal up that new cut. Grab another tree. There we go. All right, something wild again. We will get going here. A lot more options. So something like this that we want to cut down to, I'm looking for branches A lot of them will come out just completely perpendicular to the trunk. I'm looking for something that comes out a little more like this here at an angle so that you can transition into, you can make a smooth transition to a new trunk line. So we know we're going to take off probably most of the stuff up here. So I'm just going to get these out of the way. This is a bit wide for me, I think. No, we don't want that down here. We don't want to just clean out the bottom trunk because we want some good branching. This could turn into something nice. I don't want it to get too thick. Pull it back a little bit. But these way down here that are just tiny, we'll get rid of those because they'll start to cause unsightly swells and growth down the bottom if they get too big. So the big question is, do we keep it a double trunk? Is that where all the interest is? I think the answer to that is probably yes, which means we have to come in here and get rid of this thing. Otherwise, that's a really plain and honestly ugly tree. There's stuff growing at the back here as well. Let's see if we can get around. No, I'm not cutting that trunk. I'm seeing if the teeth mouth of that will fit all the way around. I have to close on that. Very good. A bit unconventional, but it worked. Perhaps this is the new leader. It comes up, peels away. Yeah, so unsightly up here. This has potential, but then again, it's perpendicular. I don't know if we'll be keeping that, but I'm at least going to take it back to something useful. Let's get it off. We're starting to get somewhere now. If it comes to here, so much of the same height. It's too similar in height. That was kind of a rough cut, so I'm just smoothing it out with this blade here. You don't have to have a grafting knife. You can use a straight edge or a box cutter or whatever you need. Just make sure it's sharp. It's way too thick over there. We'll bring it down to a bud to start transitioning that taper. Been looking at this kind of as the front, but maybe there's, yeah, definitely not the other side. Keep all, nope. I'm gonna keep all three of those. There we go. A little adjustment on the front. I have to ponder which one we get rid of. There's that one there. And then we have to get rid of either here or here as well. Since there's so much that's going to develop over here and not over here, we're going to take this one away because we have right behind it this lovely little branch emerging. So I'll be able to use that. That one. low branch. We'll patch up these holes, and this one's good for now. Quite a bit different from what it was before. I'm looking at this here as the front, where you can barely see a gap. Maybe you can put a wedge in between those two, but there is a bit of a gap here that runs all the way up, and it really comes to bear here. Maybe put a wedge in there. That is for the future artist to decide on this one. It is kind of tough to not just come in and take all these down and look exactly the same, just big low trunk chop and move along to the next one. But put in that extra little bit of time to really make sure each tree gets its due diligence. They come out looking better than expected. Oof. Sorry, it's a bit of a mess. I got 1, 2 more spots here. Trident maples will not bleed like Japanese maples. Sometimes hornbeam do. To do this on a Japanese maple right now, you can essentially kiss that tree goodbye. It bleeds so much sap that you wouldn't be able to apply the cut paste, I'll tell you that much. It would just be flowing freely from every one of these cut sites. Got one more that needs this putty, and then I'll go in with the liquid paste, patch those up. All right. I don't need to belabor the point. I mean, solid half hour in, gone through 2 trees. You can kind of see what's going on. We may do one more. I'll keep doing them, but as far as point goes, make sure you have the right tools, right? Concave, spherical knob cutters. I didn't have to use it this time around, but a good saw, a little foldable hand saw is always good to have around. And that pretty much does it. Just be aware, it may not be late enough in the year that you're going to avoid hard freezes, so may be worth a little added protection for things that you cut back to, kind of like you would if you were repotting. Just give it a little bit of love. more spot right here. That should do it. See if I can get a screenshot later for the before and after, and you can see kind of how they transform. A little different. All right, that's it. I mean, that's this time of year on deciduous. If you're not repotting them, you're doing major structural cuts. You can do it on most species, but conifer or deciduous, but just be aware, not your Japanese maples. The Trident maples are just fine for it. So good luck, enjoy. Let me know if you're looking for something like this. We can get you some material, cleaned or uncleaned, either way, whatever you're looking for. And bonsai on, y'all.